Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Marta and today we're gonna be reviewing The Witcher series books number 1 and number 2. So, The Last Wish and The Sword of Destiny. So as I have said, these are the first 2 books in the Witcher series, and basically they're 2 collections of short stories which follow the Witcher Geralt of Rivia. And that's why I have decided to review them together, because I have already read them both and it wouldn't make sense for me to make a review on the first one already knowing what happens in the second one. There's gonna be a lots of spoilers, so if you have not read them, please go on and read them, and once you read them, come back and we can discuss them together. So as always, I have divided this review into various different points that I want to touch. First and foremost is the use of the short story, just because I found it really interesting that he uses short stories in 2 of his books, which is not something that we see often. Normally when a series starts, it's just a book instead of like a series of short stories. I think it's a very, very smart way to introduce several different things. So these short stories are very, very loosely based on fairy tales. And I say loosely based because you can kind of see what fairy tale they come from, but they are so changed that sometimes it's even hard to see it. When I told this to my boyfriend, he was like, oh, I didn't see that this came from that. And like another friend that's reading the book didn't pinpoint it either. I don't know if it's just the folklorist in me, because I did folklore at uni and I really enjoyed it. But I found it really amazing how he transforms these stories, these fairy tales, into like a completely different story. And basically what the stories do is to serve as an introduction to both this world that he has made and the characters in this world. And I just think it's such a smart way to introduce these things. So from a narrative point of view, using the short story as a way of introducing your world, I think it's a very, very smart choice, because you can see all the world without overwhelming your reader. Basically, with each story, you can get different snippets of the world. You can have the magic, how the magic worlds, different parts of the magic. You can have the different monsters that there are, the different species of beings that there are, because there's like elves and nymphs and dryads and humans and witchers and sorcerers. There's also all the landscape to learn. So slowly and steadily, you start learning about this world, but you are not told everything at the start. And I just think that by the end of the book, you have such a great idea of how this world works, because in every single story you have seen a little bit of it, but it all plays together and works as a whole. So from one story, you build up upon the next. And it's just really, really intelligent. I don't know, I just found it was so well built, and the story, the world building is so well built. It is such a strong foundation to build up from. And that's what we want from a story, especially a fantasy story. We need to understand this world, we need to understand how the magic works, and what creatures are there. And here, we do. Just the same as with the world, with most characters apart from Geralt, we have these little snippets of the different characters in different stories. So, Geralt is introduced in the first story, and the first story is called The Witcher, and you basically get to know him and a bit about his morals. By the end of the 2 books, I think that I know Geralt quite well. Now, the rest of the characters kind of get their own introductory story. We have Dandelion. For some reason, they translated his name to Dandelion in English, but his original name in Polish is Jaskier, which if you have seen the TV show, he's named Jaskier, if I'm correct. I haven't seen it yet. But yeah, Dandelion in the English books. And Jennifer, they get their own short stories as an introduction to them and how Geralt met them. I just think that getting these different stories as an introduction to these different characters, which after this story continue appearing in different stories, just makes the characters very well fleshed out. You can get a lot in a short amount of time, and still you can build upon this that we have been told here and input this character somewhere else in a different story when they appear again and build upon that, which I think is very, very important, because you get to see this like very, very condensed snippet of the character, but because it is condensed, the writer is forced to show us more of them, which I think makes us know more about the character in a very, very short period of time, which I think is a very intelligent and smart way of character building. By the end of the book, I think that you know these characters very, very well, even though you haven't seen as much of them as you have of Geralt. Something which I think really added to the first book was this sort of interludes that we get between one story and the next, and they're called the Voice of Reason. Now, these take place, I think, after the streak attack in the first story, because Geralt still has his injuries, and he's basically in Melitella's temple to be cured. This kind of interludes serve various different purposes. First and foremost, they tell us a lot about Geralt, because as I said before, each story kind of builds character, but I think that the joining of the stories with this interlude kind of builds depth in Geralt. It tells us more about his character, and not only that, but also how other people feel about him. Because he's in this temple, and in one of the interludes, these people come over from the kingdom that the temple is in, even though the temple has his own ruling, and tell them that Geralt has to leave. And he has to leave because people fear witchers, and Geralt is known as the Butcher of Blaviken, and they basically think of him as a monster. Saying that they disregard him is a complete understatement. He's a complete monster for people. He's the monster that kills monsters, basically, and it just gives you another layer into what witchers are and what people think of Geralt, because obviously Geralt is one of the most well-known witchers, and he's a very, very good witcher himself. So we have this, and we also have this other use of the interludes, which is basically an introduction. Yeah, I would say, which is basically an introduction to what's gonna happen in the next story. So, for example, when we're gonna be introduced to Dandelion comes into the temple, and they are like, "Hey, do you remember when we first met?" And all of those other things. When they mention the Butcher of Blaviken, as I said before, the story of the Butcher of Blaviken happens. So it's all sort of gives you a heads up of what's gonna happen later, which I think is, on the most part, very interesting, and also is very smart, because it's not cut, new story. It kind of brings everything together and makes all the short stories come together as a whole new story. Now, we don't have this in the second book, but what happens in the second book is that most of the stories are linked with the first book, so that's how we have continuity over there. I also think that these interludes also provide a deep understanding into Jennifer's and Geralt's relationship, because by this point we know that they're not together. In the last story we learn how they met, which I will go on into detail later on, but we know that they're not together, and we know that he still loves her very much, but she doesn't want to know anything about him. Now, by this point, we don't know whether it is his fault, her fault, what happened there. But as we learn more, Jennifer's ultimate desire is to be a mother, and Geralt cannot give her that because he is a mutant, and mutants cannot have children. Jennifer cannot have children either because she is also a mutant, but she thinks that with magic and a lot of money, she can get an operation to have children. I think that the ultimate thing that broke the relationship was that, even though I'm not 100% sure, it is given to you. You can kind of feel it. And I think that these interludes really portray how hurt Geralt is and how much he misses her, together with other stuff that happens in the stories. So yeah, these interludes I just think are very useful, and they have a certain purpose, and I think it was a really, really smart addition to this book. If there is one thing that I did not like about the short story method of these books, is that I am a very plot-driven person. If I am not interested in the plot of a novel, even if it has amazing characters, amazing world building, if the plot just doesn't interest me, I will not push myself to finish the book. And these short stories are not plot-driven. What I mean is that, yes, it is a bunch of short stories, and they kind of intertwine in some ways, but is this not one whole novel with a plot? So the fact that we have short story cut, short story cut, short story cut with the interlude in the middle didn't drive a plot through the book that pulled me into reading this book. So what that means is that even though I really enjoyed them, it took me a very long time to finish these 2 books, because it is not until I think the last 2 stories of the second book that everything is knotted together. And I will go into this later on when I talk about the short stories. But this is just a huge downside for me, because I think that the world is amazing, the characters is amazing, even the plots of the short stories. Like, I really enjoyed like the individual short stories. Obviously, there's ones that I enjoyed more than others, but it took me such a long time to read and such a long time to finish, because I would put it down and I was like, I don't have this pull to finish the book. It's not like I am like hooked like that. It takes you a while to get hooked to these books, but once you get hooked, you cannot put them down, which is like an upside and a downside. Like, yes, you get all of this world building and all of these positive things, but people are gonna take longer to get hooked. But obviously it is now a major TV series, and like there's like 3-4 games out, and like a lot of people know the story, so obviously the story is very compelling, which is why I pushed myself to finish these books, because I wanted to know more and I wanted to like go into the main series. And it was frustrating because there wasn't this pull for me to keep going, and I just like forced myself to keep going. So if you're like me, force yourself to keep going through a book if you know you're gonna end up enjoying it, because it really did pay off, even though it was not as easy just like gliding in. So something that I wanted to talk about before actually going into the short stories themselves was the writing style of the novel, because yes, we have talked about the actual structure of the novel, but not the writing style. And I think the writing style in this novel is really good. I really enjoyed how this novel was written. It is like very rich writing, and it also holds back. And something which I learned in my creative writing classes is the more you hold back, the more that your reader gets. And not only like holding back information, but also holding back emotions and like letting like little hints come. So for example, by the end of The Last Wish, like the short story The Last Wish, we don't know what has happened to Gerald and Jennifer, which I will go on later into more detail. But it is hinted to what has happened to them and what has happened in like that situation. And it is something that I really enjoyed, especially because not nowadays, but like lately I have been reading a lot of like young adult fiction and a lot of like stuff for class, and it's nice to like find something that I wanted to read for myself that had such a nice rich writing style. And the best thing that I can compare it to is The Name of the Wind. If you have read The Name of the Wind, that writing style is also very rich, and I think that these 2 writing styles have a lot to like in common, and you can compare them. And it's something that lately I am not finding a lot in books and that I miss reading. Something that is so well written, so well constructed. The fact that he uses the show rather than tell technique, and that technique is something that I something that I really use and I really enjoy using often, and that sometimes I do not see in writing, and it's something that really stood out to me in these books, that you will have a scene and instead of like telling you about it, he will just show you, and like someone will be stabbed and you will be told there suddenly was a piece of metal jutting from his intestines or like his middle part or his heart or whatever. And I just think it's really rich and really well written. And I just wanted to comment about it because, as I said, it's not something that I have been finding often lately, and it's something that I have been missing a lot lately as well. So yeah, this book is very well written and the writing style is just beautiful. So having said all of that, let's go into the short stories. I am not actually going to talk about all of them because there's so many that this video would be eternal, and it probably already is, so I don't want to be making it longer than it's necessary. So the first story that I want to talk about is A Matter of Price, which I think is probably the most important story, at least in the first book, because it's the one that kind of triggers everything that's going to happen in the main series, or at least that's what it seems, And from what my boyfriend has told me about the series, that story is very, very important. I wouldn't have given it much importance, actually, if not for the fact that he told me that it was important. And then when you get to the second book, you realize why it is actually important. But basically, you have this scenario where Geralt has been invited by the Queen of Sintra, Calanthe. Let's leave it at Calanth. Let's call her Calanth. So, she has been invited to Sintra by Calanth, and he doesn't know exactly what she wants from him. But, like, when he's being prepared, the person that's preparing him tells him that what the Queen wants is that her daughter gets married to this Lord, Prince, name it X, whatever, from another country, because they want to make a trading union. So basically we have Geralt that has been called into this dinner, and he needs to make sure that this lord gets married to the princess. Now, he's not exactly sure why he's there and why there may be complications, but Calanthe knows what she's doing. He's basically in the middle of the dinner, this guy comes in, claiming that he's a knight that saved Calanthe's husband, and that the husband promised him whatever he was not expecting when he came back, which of course was their daughter. I don't remember her name. Calanthe doesn't want her daughter to go with this guy and keeps telling him to take off his helmet, and he's like, no, I cannot take it off before midnight. And apparently he's cursed to be an urchin, that's why his name is Sir Urchin, and I don't remember how they break his curse. But to break his curse, Geralt somehow makes him promise that Sir Urchin will give Geralt whatever he was not expecting when he came back. And obviously, by the end of the story, we discover that Calanthe's daughter is pregnant with the child of Sir Urchin, and that they actually want to be together, and that they have fallen in love, and the curse breaks, and everything ends happily and dandily. The thing that is very important about this is the fact that Geralt has been promised that child, because he says that he's going to come back 6 years later to pick that child. And that is what kind of like pulls all the stories together, which I will go on later on. About this story, I also wanted to talk about the fact that I didn't know where it came from, because, as I said, all of the stories kind of have a fairy tale retelling or a fairy tale that they came from. And as a Western person, I am originally from Spain and I now live in the UK. I had never heard the thing of the Law of Surprise. I had never heard about the Sir Urchin or the Urchin Knight, which are things that obviously strike me as fairy tale-ish, and I would obviously know that they're from a fairy tale, but I had never heard of them. So I started investigating, and if you didn't know and you're curious, this actually comes from Slavic tales, and it's quite common in Slavic tales. And I will put the links down below to everything that I found, because a lot of things were in Polish, but I do have a Polish friend that helped me out a bit. And I found an article and a Reddit thread that said that the Law of Surprise is something that's very, very common in Slavic tales, and that the short story is basically based off Hans May Hedgehog by the Grimm brothers. And basically it tells the story of this boy that's born half a hedgehog, and he goes into being a knight, and the Law of Surprise is also involved, and it's kind of really interesting. So yeah, I'm not going to go into more detail about that, because yeah, I would be talking here for ages, but if you want, as I said, I will leave the links down below so you can go check it out. It's quite interesting. And yeah, let's now go into the next story. Okay, so the next story that I want to talk about is the last story in the first book, and the story's name is The Last Wish. And basically, this story tells you how Geralt and Yennefer met, which in my opinion is something that we have been wanting to know ever since we started the novel, because not only in the short stories, but also in the Voice of Reason snippets, we get little mentions of her, not only by name, which we do, but also like how Geralt is mourning their relationship and the fact that he misses her a lot and he wants to be back with her, but we don't know who this Yennefer person is. So by the end, we finally get to meet her, and it's very exciting to see how these two grand people met. And basically, how the story starts is quite funny, because it's just basically Dandelion being Dandelion, and obviously, like, doing something wrong and making life hard for everyone. Because Geralt and him are fishing, and he finds a bottle for the genie in a bottle, which is what this story is based on. And basically Gerald tells him not to open it, but lo and behold, obviously he does open it, and the genie comes out and knocks him unconscious, and now we need to cure Dandelion because he's being knocked unconscious by a djinn, which he found in a river. So we have to go into the nearest city, and they are taken in by these people because they're all waiting for the city gates to open the next morning, but we need a sorcerer or sorceress to help Dandelion, because if not, he's gonna die. The only sorceress that there is the great Jennifer of Berenberg, which obviously is Jennifer, and if I remember correctly, Gerald goes to find her because he has been waiting for too long, and obviously his friend needs aid. So he goes to find her, and after the conversation that they have, and when she's getting dressed and yada yada yada, while they're going to help Dandelion, basically Gerald tells her about the djinn, and now Jennifer makes it her goal to capture this djinn. Now the djinn, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's how I'm gonna pronounce it, because I don't know how to pronounce it otherwise. If it's wrong, please let me know, but that's how I'm gonna say it. So the djinn, which is basically a genie, has already granted 2 wishes, if I'm correct, and there's this seal, the seal that sealed the bottle. Only the person that has the seal can control the genie and can ask him for wishes. Now the wishes obviously are gonna come out twisted, how not? But yeah, that's the thing. Only the person that has the seal can be granted the wishes. Now Jennifer wants to capture the djinn, and she thinks that she's strong enough to capture him. So we end up in this huge battle in which Jennifer has been trying to capture the djinn, and the djinn is not doing what she wants, because obviously she does not have the seal. The person that has the seal is Gerald. So when Gerald tells her, I've got the seal, it's like, you cannot make a wish, he's going to kill you, Jennifer pushes him to make a wish. Now the wishes that she's thinking of is like, ask for super strength. As for something that's going to help me defeat this thing, put it back in the bottle, and I'm going to have control over it. But he makes his wish, and we actually don't know what he wishes for. But now the genie is put back in the bottle, and they have defeated the genie, and Jennifer tells him, you shouldn't have done that, that was a mistake, or something like that. So even though we don't know what happened, somehow they are linked, because they end up spending the night together, and they have fallen in love. My assumption here is that this wish that he has made has somehow joined them, not only emotionally, but like they are sharing the same lifeline or something like that. So if one dies, the other dies as well. That's like the best thing I can think of. I don't know if I'm correct. Apparently we are gonna be told somewhere in the next like 5 or 6 books that there is, if I'm correct, 6 books. So we should be told that, apparently, from like what my boyfriend has told me. But for now, I don't know what has happened. And that is something that I really enjoyed about this story, because not only we get how they met, we also know how they started their relationship, but apparently they're magically linked somehow, and they will always keep coming back to each other, because we know from like all the stories that we have read, and now after finishing the 2nd book, they keep coming back to each other and having these little meetings, and they will be together for a period of time and then break up and come back together again, which is actually a very toxic kind of relationship. But they are linked in this way, and it all started there, and I really enjoyed reading about it, and my mind keeps like going back and trying to figure out this puzzle, which is something that I really, really like. So yeah, that's my opinions on The Last Wish. I really enjoyed it, and I want to know what happens next. Let's go into the next story. So now I want to jump to basically almost the very end of the 2nd book and talk about The Sword of Destiny, which again is also the title of the book. And basically this story is the first story that links us back to A Matter of Christ, which at the start I didn't see coming, because I kind of had completely forgotten about it, and until they mentioned Calanthe, I didn't really know who Ciri was. But basically we have Gerald, and he's walking into Brockelon Forest because he wants to meet with Lady Ethne? I think her name was Lady Ethne. I'm probably very wrong, but that's what my brain wants to recall. Well, she's gonna meet with this lady, which is the queen of the Dryads, or the ruler of the Dryads. And the Dryads are basically these very fierce killers. And from what we learn from the story, every time that a woman or a girl walks into the forest, they grab her and train her to be a Dryad, because the Dryads are being lowered in numbers. They are very diminished, and they need more people more Dryads to join them. So he's walking in Brooklyn Forest, and he starts finding a lot of corpses, and then he bumps with the Dryads, and with the Dryads, they end up finding this girl, which her name is Ciri, and we don't know it, Geralt doesn't know it, but Ciri realizes it herself. Ciri is the daughter of Calanth, so she is technically a princess from Sintra. She's Calantha's granddaughter. So she's the destined child that we were told all those stories ago. And basically, once they get to Lady Aithne's temple, castle, forest, fortress, forest place where she lives, / that's the best way I can think of naming it. We get there and she tells Ciri, hey, I want you to stay with us and be a Dryad. And Ciri's like, no, I'm destined to be a Witcher. And that's why she lets them go. So Geralt and Ciri are let go, and they found Mousak. And basically Geralt realizes who Ciri is, and he asks her, did you know? She was like, yes, I realized when I saw who you were and you told me who you were. You're Geralt of Rivia. I'm destined to be a Witcher with you. Take me with you and train me. And he doesn't take her with him. He leaves her back with Mousak, and he just lives and goes a different way, because he doesn't want to take her. And at first we don't know why, but then this story is followed with something more, which I don't know if it's just like kind of a prologue or it's an actual story. But basically, if you see me looking down, it's because I have some notes here. Basically, after Geralt has left and everything, we find ourselves that the world is at war. Brooklyn Forest, we were told in the previous story, is shrinking very fast because of the dark forces that are coming and cutting the trees and everything. So that's why the Dryads wanted to fight back. And basically, and something more, Geralt finds this merchant, and this merchant is asking for help, and the Witcher helps him defeat these guys that want to not trap him, but like they're in a bridge and there was like some threat. I don't remember, to be honest, I don't remember exactly what happened, but I remember that Geralt helps him out and he's badly injured. And while he's injured, Jurga, which is the merchant, takes him on his cart to see a healer. And he starts hallucinating. And he remembers when he went back to Sintra 6 years later. And he tells Calanth, okay, Calanth, I'm here for the child that was promised. Where is he? And it is made very clear that Geralt is looking for for a boy. And Calanth obviously knows that it is a girl who is destined. So she tells him, okay, here's a bunch of children. Pick a child. If you pick the correct child, I will let you go away with it. So Geralt decides that he's not gonna pick a child, he's not gonna play games. He's like, okay, that's fine, I'm gonna leave. You don't have to give the child to me. But obviously, it is made very clear that destiny will have its way. And when they get to Jurga's house, Geralt made him promise that in payment for what Jurga asked him for protecting Jurga must give him something that he was not expecting when he got home. So he invokes again the law of surprise. And obviously, who's waiting at home for Jurga? Ciri is. Which I was like, it cannot be, but obviously it is. And finally, Geralt decides to get Ciri and basically let her stay with him and train her as a Witcher. which I really enjoyed, like, this last part of the book, because it finally all made sense. It all came together, and we have this storyline now where Ciri is gonna be learning how to be a witcher with Geralt. And I know that's at some point she's gonna be a very important character, because you cannot see it, but I even have a figurine of her up here. It's something that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the whole storyline, how it happened, how everything came together, how Ciri actually knowed who Geralt was, and she actually wanted to go with him because she believes in this destiny, and Geralt didn't want to believe in it. It was all really good. Oh, also, before I forget, in this story, there's also this battle. So there has been this battle, and 14 sorcerers have died in the battle, and Geralt goes to see what sorcerers they were that died, because there's a manor with all their names. And it is not explicitly said, but it is not mentioned. What's the word? What's the word? You kind of get the idea that it was Jennifer's name there. So even though I think Jennifer is not dead, we are made to believe that she is dead. And now I don't think that she's dead for 2 reasons. First reason, I know she's a very big character and she appears in the rest of the books. Second reason, if my theory is right and Geralt and Jennifer share a lifeline, if Jennifer is dead, Geralt should be dead. Geralt is very much alive, so hello, Jennifer cannot be dead. I refuse to believe that, even though I am made to believe it. I do not accept it. Jennifer is alive. Thank you very much. So yeah, this is something that left me a bit stumped, because I don't want Jennifer to be dead. I don't know what I think about her yet. I kind of like her, but sometimes she stresses me out. But I think that there's a lot that Jennifer and Geralt have to go through, and I want to see them going through it. And overall, I really enjoyed these 2 stories, because they finally made the plot a plot point and something to follow through. So it's basically like a very good introduction to the next book, and I'm very excited to start reading it, because I didn't start it to film this review. So before I finish this video, I actually want to make an honorable mention to the story A Little Sacrifice. And now this honorable mention is just because the start of the story, I just found it hilarious, basically. So I wanted to share it with you guys. We basically have Geralt, he's in a boat. And in this boat, he's talking with the Duke of the land that he's at, and a mermaid. Now, he's serving as translator between the Duke and the mermaid, and they're in love. And what the Duke is wanting to know is whether this mermaid is going to tell the witch that she wants to change her fins for legs, And the mermaid is like, no, I don't want to change my fins for legs. You should change your legs for fins. And the Duke is like, I cannot do that. And Geralt is like, yeah, no, he cannot do that. If he does that, he's going to go into the water, probably drown, because he cannot breathe underwater. And the mermaid is like, well, I don't care. He should do that if he loves me. It's like, okay, you should literally die for love. And the mermaid gets really angry because the Duke doesn't want to exchange his legs for fins. It's not that he doesn't want to, he just doesn't want to die. And she's like, okay, I'm not gonna do this, I'm just gonna go, bye. By the end of the story, she does it. But what I found hilarious about this is after, Geralt tells Dandelion, what's going on and what's happening, Dandelion decides that he's gonna write a ballad. Now, let me read you what actually happens. Dandelion says, never fear, I already have the first stanzas. In my ballad, the mermaid will sacrifice herself for the Duke. She'll exchange her fish tail for slender legs, but will pay for it by losing her voice. The Duke will betray her, abandon her, and then she'll perish from grief and turn into foam. When the first rays of sunshine, who would believe such rot? Says Geralt. It doesn't matter. Ballads aren't written to be believed. I'm sorry. I just found it so hilarious. That Dandelion actually writes the ballad or this fairy tale of the actual Little Mermaid. And I just think that this speaks to me, because when I was little, I have always wanted to be a mermaid. The Little Mermaid was my absolute favorite Disney movie. It was my favorite tale. I absolutely adored it. I did the Little Mermaid in school as a musical. I absolutely adored it. I think that you get the idea. And after reading this, it just brought me back to those years. And I just found it really, really hilarious that this story that we know now, Andres has decided that, oh well, it's Zendaya who wrote it. This was the actual story. It was just a misunderstanding, but the tale has been twisted. I just really liked it. So after everything that I have said, I have decided to give both of the books 4 stars because I think that they were wonderfully constructed. The writing style is amazing. The stories are amazing. But I just think that they do not quite do it for me to be 5 stars just because they didn't grip me enough. I wasn't hooked because of that short story method that he uses. But the thing is, I cannot wait to actually be able to read the 3rd book now. So keep posted for that. I will try to upload it as soon as I'm finished with the 3rd book. So that will be coming soon as well. So this is all that I have for you guys today. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to enjoy more bookish content. And I hope to see you all soon. Goodbye!